Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first snow, or at least since yesterday. I hope you had a good weekend, and we continue today on governance, smart governance for smart cities. Story so far, we had last time citizen design science, and I hope walking around the city you saw a few examples of that. Today we go to smart urban governance, and we believe that this is a success factor for the future city, something that really needs to be done. If you have watched the MOOC video, then you know roughly what it is. If you have not, we have to talk about a few things, what they are, what smart governance is needed for, and how it can change the city of the future. Here we are in the course. We are now in the 6th lectures on governance, participatory design, and management. And we do start the second or the third exercise today, and it will be due then in a couple of weeks. And we will explain at the end how it works. Here's our content. Governance, what is it and what is it for? Then the MOOC and the definitions you will have seen, or you get it today. Then organizations that need governance, like lectures, like this one, or universities, cities, countries. We then explore urban governance, inclusiveness, and livability, and talk about extraction and inclusion. Then smart urban governance and resulting changes. Who will plan, manage, and rule the city in the future? Will it be like Amsterdam in the 1600s, or will it be like Singapore in these days, or will it be something completely different? Outlook and conclusions at the end, and the exercise. All right, so what is governance and what needs governance in the first place? That was the old days, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, when we made the first MOOC, Massive Open Online Course. We were at ETH, we prepared the MOOC, and then we unleashed it to the internet, and everybody in the world could participate in it, can listen to it, and take part of it. But it was still much separated from ETH. Students were here, but had nothing to do with the MOOC. So that was one form of governance, to keep it separated. Today, the situation is more complex, because today, ETH and you are sitting right in the middle of the MOOC. It's happening at the same time. You can interact with these people out there. They can interact with you. So this requires a completely different form of governance. If suddenly the internet would break down, you could not connect to them anymore, and vice versa. But we could still be here and talk and learn from each other. But the technological advance, the smartness of such a new teaching exercise would break down, and one part of the learning experience would disappear. So a lecture, any lecture that you are in, needs some governance, because for some reason you behave very well. You sit there, you listen, you look, sometimes you write, sometimes you remember, sometimes you do your exercises. But if there was no agreement on how we have the governance of this lecture, everybody would just come and go as they want. They would talk, they would read, and so on. Let's move one step further up. You are in a university here, and in a university, it is very important to have a working budget, because without a working budget, none of you would be here. This room wouldn't be here. This campus wouldn't work, nothing. And this budget process and the embedding of the budget process into the governance of the university takes a lot of effort. Just as an expression or as a picture how complex it can be is the different levels of governance in this university, just for financial reasons. So here on this level we have different departments. On this level we have departments and the school board, and then here we have the school board and the planning committee, and then we have the ETH domain at the top. And between each one of them, agreements have to be made how and when to budget and how to do things. So here we go even one step further into how the individual part of the budget are distributed and negotiated between the members of the university. So we have here the departments again. We have the infrastructure, this being part of the infrastructure. We have the board of the school, which has an extra budget. And we have the individual professorships, like this one or the one from J. Cable next door. And again, we have the board who makes the final decision of who gets how much. And if we go even one more step up from the university to the board of the ETH domain, again, we have different levels of budgeting, of governance going up all the way to the Swiss parliament. So you can imagine between you and the Swiss parliament, which makes a 4-year performance contract with ETH, then we make a performance contract with individual departments for every year, and then the departments break down their teaching, their research year by year, and finally it goes to the semester, us teaching you, you working with us. In a semester, you have different levels of governance, of agreements. And finally, the whole thing is organized in these different bodies. We have the Department of the Interior. Nowadays, it's the Department of Technology and the Departments of Economy, who is at the top of the domain of the Swiss Institute of Technology. And the Swiss Technologies of Technology are ETH Zurich, ETH Lausanne, and then the research parts, the Paul Scherrer Institute, the EMPA, the WSL, and the EAWAG, 4 research institutes. Also, this is part of the governance of this university. You can now imagine it goes on and on and on. This is just a university, but this goes all across from you being here for many countries, sitting in this room, which was built for you and others, all the way to parliament. If you take not a university, but a city, it gets even more complex. So what is this urban governance? And here's a definition from a UN document. And it says it's the exercise of political, economic, and administrative authority in the management of a country's affairs at all levels. Governance comprises the complex mechanisms, processes, and institutions through which citizens and groups articulate their interests, mediate their differences, and exercise their legal rights and obligations. So this is one important definition. And another extension to that, governance includes the state, but transcends it by taking in the private sector and civil society. The state creates a conducive political and legal environment. The private sector generates jobs and income. The civil society, that's all of us, facilitates political and social interaction, mobilizing groups to participate in economic, social, and political activities. Because each has its weaknesses and strengths, major objective of our support for good governance is to promote constructive interaction among all 3. So you can already imagine it's quite a complex creature, governance. It spans many levels of complexity and many levels of people and different parts of society. Finally, good governance occurs when societal norms and practices empower and encourage people to take increasingly greater control over their own development in a manner that does not impinge upon the accepted rights of others. And with this definition, we are right back to our last lecture, which was on this citizen design science, because this is part of good governance, or future good governance. Sometimes it doesn't work that well. Who's from Germany here? One, so you know that. Can you maybe say briefly what you remember from this? Do you know this case here?
Is that Stuttgart?
Yeah. So what do you remember from that?
Speak. That's the central station in Stuttgart. It's in southern Germany. and they wanted to transform the station from a station where trains go in and go out in the same direction again to a station where trains just run through, kind of, to increase efficiency. And then they had different kind of problems. I think like the public perception of that project wasn't that good, and like people were very many people were saying they don't want to have that and actually demonstrating against it. And I think there are technical problems as well.
Many technical problems, yes. So this is the old situation that you see here, this yellow part, all this area taken up by the train station. And the alternative was to make the train go like this underground. So almost all of the space would be set free for other uses, like here in Zurich. So doesn't sound like a bad idea, but the problem was, thank you for your assessment. I didn't warn you before, sorry, but you knew, very good. The assessment was that the type, the kind, how the government, they call it obrigkeitsstaatliche Art, a really top-down decision-making, how they decided that above the heads of the population, very critical assessments that had existed before, they were covered, they were not given to the public, not made transparent. Problems that were there were put down as not being very important, and the concerns of the Stuttgart people were not taken serious. So all of this led to almost an impasse for many years, that the idea, which was good in the first place, could not be realized because of this missing good governance. And as a remedy, and this is then also part of a society which is not only, I would say, smart, but also resilient, they realized, okay, we have to do something. And what they did is that the University of Stuttgart invented a whole master program called Bürgerbeteiligung. And Bürgerbeteiligung means basically civic engagement. It means participatory design. It means citizen design science. So have a master now in Bürgerbeteiligung in Stuttgart, in which you learn as students, hopefully moving into leading positions in the government, how to avoid such situations and how to make cities work better. So that's what happened in the past. And you, all of us, every single one of you has to make up her or his mind in which environment you want to work in the future, or to which direction you want to push the governance of a city. Either to this direction that we saw before, this image, from a very high-tech observation of the life of the city, and then taking decisions and actions from the people here in control of the screens and the control of the city. Or if we go this way, that we discussed last time, we go more into a citizen engagement area. And this one also, same picture you saw last time, making designs, making exercises in your class, leading from many, many people making their first exercise, then everybody having to pick somebody else's work to continue, is also a very specific form of a education or teaching governance. And out of this comes this, and out of this comes this. And you can imagine it's complex, it's complicated maybe, but in the end, hopefully, you will have the better result or the best possible result coming out of all of these proposals. There are many other applications that people do to help, to support the decision-making of people. So high-tech suddenly gives us a new possibility to make governance better, because people can get directly involved in the governance. So in this one here, your previous colleague and PhD student Dong-Yeon Shin, he made this to record people's path through the city. He made an app to give to people how they walk to the city, and this way then he could find out where it would be best to place a new student housing rather than just putting it down somewhere. And you can see every day, if you read the newspaper, any newspaper, you can actually see there's always, or even more and more of such small apps coming up. Now here, this is from today. It says app calls to record if somebody is doing the wrong parking. So people make up these apps themselves and contribute to the governance or change the governance of a city, because this couldn't have been done before. But of course, we here in design want that rather than just blaming people or shaming people or recording people, you want to make positive proposals how to improve the situation. And you see your colleagues and others who actually make whole sites. This one called eCity, a participatory platform for urban planning. You can see that this is really a movement that is picking up speed. Okay, at this point, I would like to have a short interception. Okay. So those of you, now I have a test for you. Who knows this page? Ooh, this is a bad sign. Either nobody took the MOOC, or if you took the MOOC, nobody saw the book, or even if you saw the book, nobody saw this page. Because this page is about, this is from this book, Information Cities, the e-book, and you can use it like that. And in this book, there's a chapter on urban sociology, and that's where governance is described as an important feature of future cities. And the research we did in Singapore, we're doing in Singapore, is concentrating on 9 metropolitan areas, as you can see here. It's Tokyo, Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Singapore, Calcutta, and there you go, Calcutta, Lagos, Paris, Mexico City, and Los Angeles. And you can see from that how the researcher around Professor Christian Schmid concentrated on this governance aspect in those cities. And you can even touch the images there, and you can get a comparison of the largest cities in the world here, and you can see where the density of the world is highest, meaning that governance is a really big issue in these emerging places here. And if we watch carefully what good governance is, then we come to 2 people most of the time in recent days. These are the names of these 2 people, Acemoglu and Robinson. These are professors at Harvard. They wrote a book called Why Nations Fail, The Origins of Power, Prosperity, and Poverty, as a non-fiction book. And in that book, you can read very good things about, a very good explanation about extraction and inequality and inclusiveness, and how those 2 influence governance and the progress of cities. They focus on extraction as a situation that a person, a group, a company, a part of the population, or ruling party render such power over the rest of the population that they can force them to work for them at a cost below the value of their work, or deprive them of their human rights. So this is a very bad way of governance, of course. And on the other hand, you have inclusion and equality, which is the good part. And inclusion and equality is based on social equity. That describes a situation when the difference in income and political influence between the richest and the poorest sections of the urban population is very small. This is connected to the so-called Gini coefficient. Who has heard about the Gini coefficient? Okay, there's a few more. That's good. Is a positive measurement, and its rise signifies that inequalities in society are increasing. So if the Gini coefficient is going up, then inequality is increasing. And inclusion, this is seen as the most important factor to guarantee the longevity, sustainability, and resilience of urban systems, because through inclusion, you can foresee conflicts and you can solve conflicts. So in this example from Stuttgart 21, it was not really an inclusive process, so the governance process lacked the inclusion part, and therefore it didn't work. Cities can live well, or not live well, but they can grow both under extractive and inclusive systems, but the extractive systems that govern cities are most of the time short-lived. Short-lived can be a few years or a few decades. And the really well-working systems, well-working cities that are existing for many years or many hundreds of years, they always in their high times have inclusive systems that make them resilient in the long run. The governance aspects are also important in judging the quality of a city or the livability of a city. And here we have the criteria that your predecessors, it was in the year 2014 and the fall semester of 2013, defined for themselves. We asked them, what are your criteria to make a city more livable? And of course, all of these criteria have to be have a good governance system behind them. So the students, they voted, and their vote, you can see here, most of the votes were given to transportation infrastructure. That was their most important criteria for livability. Culture was the second one. Safety and security, education, climate, economics, nature, healthcare, location, stability, environment, freedom, atmosphere, social life, architecture, size of the city, cleanliness, and so on. They came later. But these are the ones that they thought were most important. And then according to these, they made their ranking. And their ranking would say which are the frozen.
I know, wait. Do we have to click here first?
It's not connected. Try it. Well, you can go back to the screen. But this is another example of governance, you know, because a smart city or a smart lecture or a smart screen starts to have not its own life, but it reacts in a certain way. Now the connection was lost between that device and the screen. And so I had to stop. You would have seen one more, but it's not so important. You would have seen what the previous people in the MOOC voted what cities would be best for them. You want to try again? No, it's okay. Go back to the other one. This is a special device. Some of you who might have used this special capability of AirPlay, that you can connect devices in this manner, but it's not totally bug-free, as you could see. Anyway, let's go back to this one, and let us look at the. Can you go to the Ledergerber, to the MOOC? Let's look at a real city and how in a real city governance is executed.
It's the second one, right?
Yeah. Okay. Let's just, before we start, let's just see if you have a question to the definition or the governance in your own life, how you see it connected. Does it make an impact on you? It has to have, because most of you come from very different backgrounds, different countries, different cities. All of them have different governance, even governance systems. Yet in the end, you're all in this room and adhere to the governance of this lecture. So you must have different distances to travel from your governance in your city or in your country to the governance here in this lecture. Each one of you. It's by definition so, but it seems to work at least because you all made it here. Okay, now in this MOOC, as you might have seen or might not have seen, in this MOOC we have different parts, and in the last part I interviewed the former mayor of Zurich, Dr. Elmar Ledergerber. And let's try and listen what he has to say.
Welcome back to Smart Cities. Today's topic is smart cities and smart governance. And we are very lucky to have today with us the former mayor of the city of Zurich in Switzerland, Dr. Elmar Ledergerber, who was running the city from 2002 until 2009. We want to start with a simple question. Why do you think is it important to have good governance for a city?
Well, you can see that around the world. If sometimes the government is changing from one person or to the next, you can see there are big differences, and you can do something well and you can do it very bad. You will not see the effects after two or 3 days, but if you don't use the chances you have and make good decisions and finding the balance between people and government, so you will create a catastrophe.
So Zurich is a city of about 400,000 now, but you have been there in the city for a long time. You are not running a city by yourself, you're not a dictator, but you're bound in a group of people who run the city together with you. Maybe you can say a few words to the governance system in Switzerland, in the canton of Zurich, and in the city of Zurich.
Well, we have a very basic democratic system on every level, on the level of the city, on the level of the canton, which is a kind of district, and of the national level. And this makes government so difficult in Switzerland because you have about every issue a votation.
He means
on the local level,
a vote,
on the national level,
voting on
we have
every
about
decision.
6 times votations in Switzerland about these issues, and it is very hard to predict sometimes what will become out. But you can say when the votation is won, you can be sure that the solution is strong, and the solution will stay for the coming days or coming times. This is very important. That gives stability.
Right, so it's also carried by many people and not by very few. Yes. Now the success of Zurich, it became during your reign the #1 city in livability, and of course we want all smart cities to be livable cities, and we will discuss this later more. But how do you think the governance of Zurich helped to make Zurich such a livable city?
Well, I think there are many decisions which we had prepared in this time. First of all, infrastructure. Infrastructure is so important for economic development, so important for quality of life, is so important for the people living there that you really have to give a high importance to this infrastructure. Public transport system in Zurich is outstanding over the world, and this gives already a high quality to stay here. And this is a decision made by the politicians and adopted by the people.
Now, you described this in a very coherent way. What is your motto for the city of Zurich today? How would you put it together in one sentence?
Well, we had several mottos all this time long. First, we said little big city. It was a little bit too little, but it was a good slogan. Then afterward, they were saying Zurich, downtown Switzerland. It was working rather good in the international context, but our colleagues in Switzerland, they got angry about that because they say Zurich is not really downtown Switzerland. But now we have a good slogan as well, which says world-class Swiss-made. And I think this brings to the point really good where we are and what we are.
One of the points that happened during your reign was that information technology companies moved to Zurich, and at the same time other companies left the cities or were going down. Do you think that was important also to contribute to the livability and to the smartness of the city?
Well, I think for whole Europe, this was a big, big issue. This desindustrialization in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and also in Zurich. Zurich was a very strong industry town, and we lost almost all industrial production this 20, 30 years. But in Zurich, we were able to change, and we had a big attraction for these international companies coming to Zurich. And so the second sector was changed by the third sector. One of these sectors was IT, research as well, health as well, and many others, banking, of course, as well. But IT was a very important one. And in this time, in the 90s, Google decided to come to Zurich and make Zurich their European Center for Research and Development, and Microsoft and IBM did the same.
That's wonderful. And what do you think is the role of technology now in the future of the city, for the smart city? Do you think it will change, or will it just be more and more, or will it change fundamentally the way people behave?
We noticed that the development in technology and science is always being faster and faster. That means to be able to follow this speed, you have to be prepared. You have to have young people able and willing to follow this development and to invest their life as well in this development. And if you have this kind of people and professionals, you really can be smart also in future concerning these technologies.
You had the very difficult task to be in a city that had been at its peak in population in the 1960s, 1970s, then was losing inhabitants, and then was slowly growing again. And you made it grow on the one side, you made it grow in a sustainable way in terms of jobs, and also grow in terms of quality of life. What then is the role of the population in the governance of Zurich? How are they related to the governing bodies of the city of Zurich?
Well, as I told already, every decision taken by the authority has to be adopted by the people. So you have to stay in a constant dialogue with the population, with the mass media, and try to explain what you are thinking, what you are developing, what you are doing there. And only if the people is able to follow and accept it, then it will become a new strategy for the future, which will maybe bring you a lot of opportunities.
And you said you love the people of Zurich because they are, in their way of acting and voting, very liberal, free and open. So I think this is also an important quality, the relation between the people and the governance of the city.
I think if you want to make a good governance, you have to have a good relation to your people. I love our people because, as you mentioned, they are deciding sometimes very critically, but they are in the heart, they are in the good sense liberal, they are tolerant, and they are forwarded, they're looking forward and are socially understanding and responsible as well. So in the most of the cases, I was very happy after the votation, and I said, thank you very much, population of Zurich. I'm so happy to serve you. I'm the first servant here. So this makes the job I had not only very strong, but very sympathetic and very fantastic.
Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge, how you did it with us. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So you can see from this interview that many of the points that we were mentioning before come up in the mayor's answers. Actually, there was no rehearsal or anything between us before this interview. It was really the points that he brought up, and independently from that, many of these points we had found out either from literature or from studying livable cities. And that's interesting because most of the most livable cities in the world, if you take the effort and talk to the governors or to the mayors of these cities, you will hear similar stories. Whereas when you talk to mayors of cities that are not doing so well in terms of livability, you hear different stories. But it's up to you, of course, to find that out. This seems to work here. Now let's go from this one back to the harsh world, which is now the third exercise, and after the third exercise we come back briefly for the sum up. And the third exercise will be presented by Estefania Tapias.
Can you come on time?
Okay, so this is an overview of the different exercises we've done. So now we are in exercise 3, which is the second part of the first exercise. So we're going to use again our QuaKit online tool developed by one of our colleagues, Artem. And in this exercise, we will give you 2 weeks because we feel you need more time to make it. So the handing exercise will be for the 21st of November. And then the idea for this exercise is you go again into the Smart Cities MOOC and go to the compulsory exercise of week 6, and you will follow, you will see all the description for the exercise and follow the instructions and go to your personalized link. After that, in the link, the exercise will ask you to rate the different designs from other participants according to one criteria. So the online tool with Decide for You will give you one criteria as soon as you go to the link. And then after that, you have to start rating and comparing the different designs from the other participants. So for this course, what we are asking you is to choose 3 of these designs that you rated and explain your decision. It could be a very good design, or it could be something that you thought it was a bit complicated and you didn't rate it that good, or so on. But then just choose 3 that you want, and please explain your decision. So this is what I was saying before. As soon as you open the link, the tool will give you this window with one criteria. You can also go into the same platform on the left corner, and then you can also see the other criteria if you want to know about the other different criteria. And then this is the first part, and the second part is that we want to kindly ask you to propose and describe a tool, like for example a visibility analysis or a temperature simulation tool, that can be used with the QuaKit online tool to support you to judge and rate this design in the future. Because as Artem has mentioned before, this is a prototype that we're testing, but then we are also thinking about what other tools can we offer inside the platform to help you rate and judge the different designs. And again, just please create a Word document with these 3 steps and send it to Professor Schmidt or to me. And again, the deadline will be in 2 weeks, the 21st of November. I will again send you an email, like a follow-up email today, again with the description. Any questions about the exercise? Does anyone has done it already? Okay, so you are on to date in the MOOC. Great. Do you have any questions to Artem about this exercise or the tool?
Is it all clear? Can I?
Yes.
Yes.
I have a question. If we begin to, because I started to watch also and comparing the proposals, but my question is, if we stop at some point, can we continue, for example, another day, or does it save where you are?
You can continue only if you use the same browser.
Okay.
So this is it's stored. It's kind of stored within a session of your browser. So if you come up like in a couple hours, then it's okay. Then it's better still to do it at once. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. More questions? The reason why also Artem is here, we made the exercise a little bit more difficult than the last one, because we heard from you that was maybe a bit too simple, although we get many things out of this, and you will see in the last presentation. But especially the third part. As you could see before, these are the criteria: visibility, centrality,
connectivity and accessibility, which are, we think, important for the design of a neighborhood or a city. And these criteria, I asked Artem, can't you make it automatic so that once you have done the design, the program checks automatically to which degree connectivity, accessibility, and visibility and centrality are guaranteed? And he said, not for this MOOC, but for the next one. So that means next year in the Responsive Cities MOOC, these things will be partially, I hope, automated so that they help you in deciding if it's true or not. Because even if you look at the very simple setup, like the neighborhood that you redesigned, you get a high complexity of surfaces facing each other or pointing in other directions, and it will be hard for you to assess every single of these buildings and facades. But with the help of these programs that are able to do that, that were developed here and in other places, this will be partially automated. And therefore, this is the reason why, as the third part of the exercise, we ask you propose and describe a tool, for example, a visibility analysis or temperature simulation tool, or any other part, that criteria that you think is important for the assessment of the quality of an urban design. Describe this tool, because that would help also us and Artem to implement it for the next year, for your colleagues in the next year. And then that could be used with Quarkit to support you to judge and to rate these designs in the future. This is, of course, the idea that your judgment of designs becomes more and more sophisticated, becomes more and more supported by the tools that are available, and becomes therefore more objective, hopefully. Okay, so that's the reason behind it, and I hope Artem will be able to program all of this until next year.
Me too.
Okay, you too. Okay, thank you. Thank you. So we go back to the content of the course, to the urban governance. And remember the last words that Ledergerber, the former mayor, said, you know, how important it was to have a good relation to the people of the city, which is completely separate from any computational tool or something. There must be a relation between the people of the city and the mayor or the people who govern the city. This is so important because this is what separates and differentiates it from what we know today as the smart city. Because the smart city of today is mainly instruments, it's mainly programs, it's sensors, it's computer technology, but it's void of the personal relation. And therefore, these words, this last one, are very important, because this is what I said before, you will find in all livable cities, or the top livable cities in the world, always the mayors or the governing bodies of that city try to and have a good relation with the population. And then the smartness of the city is another criterion, which is important, more important over time, because it helps also the population to make more objective decisions. All right, so here we have urban governance, as it's explained, as the art of public leadership. There you have again, it's the art. It's not a total science. It's not just something mechanical, but it's an art of public leadership. Interesting that this definition comes from the Novartis Foundation for Sustainable Development. So it's industry writing something about governance of a city. And the three distinct dimensions of governance: the form of political regime, the process by which authority is exercised, and the capacity of governments to design, formulate, and implement policies and discharge functions. These are seen as the three important dimensions. And then the criteria, they are important. That applies to all cities in the world. You can check with your own city if it is there, if it is working, and if they are all true, then you normally have a good governed city and a livable city. So legitimacy of the government, who has elected, how did it come into action, accountability of political and official elements, the competence of the government's people, the respect for human rights and rule of law. So these are just the very important criteria that it should work. Just think of your own city, your own government. Does it do that or not? And then you have a good glimpse on good governance in your own city. Okay, conclusions. Urban or smart urban governance is very specific to each city, but it also determines its development. In Zurich, which we didn't talk about before, we had two distinctly different urban governments. They were even from the same political party, but the representatives had a different attitude towards the city. The one person said the city of Zurich is basically completed, constructed, we don't need more infrastructure. The other person said, let's open up, we need to have more development. That was Mr. Ledergerber, you just heard. Then the quality of urban governance is decisive for the progress of the urban system. Same story that I just gave could apply for this. So it's not just that you have to have urban governance, but it's really, it has to be qualitatively good. The third thing is, if it's neglected, what will happen? If good governance is neglected in any city, the consequences are severe. They might not happen immediately, but over a period of time, they can really lead to the destruction of the city. It can lead to blocking the developments or to threatening the entire society and its foundations. So we have many, many examples around the world that you can look at, and you can see, you can trace it back normally to not good governance of the country or of the city. Then the point, inclusiveness in urban decision making is of utmost importance. You heard again Mr. Ledergerber, who said, I like the people, I love the people, I want to talk to them, I want to listen to them. That means he is inclusive, he has to be inclusive. All groups of people in the city have to be heard, all of them, not just the ruling people. In that book from that I mentioned before, Why Nations Fail, you can read exactly why certain cities have failed because of the non-inclusiveness of the decision-making process. And in that aspect, of course, that the citizen design science process that we defined last time and that you are encouraged to look into more in the future is very important, because that is really an inclusive process. Also, an inclusive process is, for example, this massive open online course, because you are not the only ones who can take it anymore. You are not exclusive in this club, but all these other people, these 10,000 other people around the world can do that, because it's an inclusive. The only exclusion is that only the people who have access to the internet in some way or the other can take it. If they don't have that, then they are excluded, and therefore it's not totally inclusive. Okay, so these are the conclusions from the city. Maybe if you want to do some further reading, this picture here, you saw it maybe in this weekend's book descriptions of new books coming out. That is a picture of which city? Who's somebody here from the Netherlands? Yes? Do you recognize it? No? Well, you're not living in the 16th century. That's maybe why not. But this is Amsterdam. And the title of the description of this article was all good things will end at a point. You know, Amsterdam around 1600 was one of the richest cities in the world, and everything seemed to work. And the whole governance of the city was that of a Nachtwächterstaat. How do you translate that? Kind of laissez-faire governing of the city, that only the very small, very weak governance, that only the security, the infrastructure were guaranteed, but the rest, everybody could basically act and do what they wanted and progress. But after a while, that didn't work anymore, because some people took advantage of it, and then the governance was not strong enough to bring them back to behaving better. also the investments they had made didn't work anymore, so the city went almost bankrupt, and so it came down. But at one point in time, Amsterdam, like Venice, like many other cities in the world, were absolutely fantastic. Everything was wonderful, but even when they worked beautifully, looking back from today, you could see that they had made a major mistake in not being inclusive, in not talking to all of the people, not involving people in the decision making. So that should be a lesson for us for the future, and also for smart cities, that the smartness is inclusive for everybody. So I leave you with that. Wish you a wonderful week. See you next week, and good luck with the exercise. Thank you.